Mr. President, last week, President Biden, I wish him well, gave his farewell address to America. He said a number of things, but one in particular got my attention. He warned America about, quote, his words, not mine, quote, a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of very few ultra-wealthy people. President Biden went on to say, and I quote again, today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead, end quote. Now, I don't know who President Biden was talking about.
What's up, patriots? And welcome back to Right View Nation, where we speak the truth without apology, defend our Constitution without compromise, and call out corruption without fear. Now, I've got a story today that ought to set your American blood boiling, and if it doesn't, you better check your pulse, because the radical elite just made their boldest move yet in their long game to control the narrative across this country.
But I know one particular circumstance about which I'm going to speak that fits his warning. Again, I don't know if the circumstance I'm about to describe is what President Biden meant, but if the shoe fits, wear it, Cinderella. Let me cut to the chase. Mr. George Soros is an oligarch. He's one of the wealthiest people in the world. He's a friend of President Biden's. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, President Biden just gave him, I think, the highest civilian honor that a president can give to a civilian, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Mr. George Soros is buying WWL AM radio in New Orleans. Let me say that again. That may not mean much to you, Mr. President, but it means a lot to my people in Louisiana. Mr. George Soros is buying WWL AM radio in New Orleans. WWL AM radio is practically an institution in my state. It's been around since 1922. 1922. Over 100 years. It's a clear channel. It's what the communications experts call a clear channel Class A station. Its transmitter power output is about 50,000 watts. That's a lot, folks. That's the maximum for commercial AM stations in the United States. It's the lead station on the New Orleans Saints radio network. It's an important station. And Mr. George Soros is buying it. Now, what does that mean, and how did this happen? WWL is owned by a national company called Odyssey, A-U-D-A-C-Y, Odyssey. Odyssey has about 220 radio stations nationwide, one of which, of course, is WWL. Second largest radio network in America. It reaches, I think, 45 different markets throughout our country, Mr. President. 165 million Americans. It's huge. Odyssey borrowed too much money. They took on too much debt. They took on about $1.9 billion worth of debt, and they couldn't service that debt with their revenues. So what did they do? They did what many other corporations do when they can't service their debt. They went into what's called Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Not Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is when they liquidate the company. Chapter 11 bankruptcy is when a company goes into bankruptcy in front of a bankruptcy judge and says, Judge, we want to get all of our creditors and debtors together and restructure our cash flow and our debt so we can come out of this bankruptcy a surviving entity. They went into Chapter 11 with a bankruptcy plan. Mr. George Soros immediately pounced. He, of that $1.9 billion in debt, he bought about $415 million of it. Cash on the barrelhead. Paid 50 cents on the dollar. One of the tenets of the reorganization was that all the current shareholders would be wiped out. The new creditors would assume equity positions in the company. I know that sounds complicated, and it can be, but really what it means is that the bondholders, one of which is Mr. Soros, after he bought $415 million worth of debt, became a shareholder. And Mr. Soros is now the largest single shareholder in Odyssey radio stations, including WWL AM in New Orleans, an institution. Now, in America, you can't just go do this. Why is that? Because those airwaves on which WWL and the other radio stations broadcast, they don't belong to the radio stations. They belong to you, and you, and you, and you. These airwaves, the spectrum, if you will, they're owned by the American people. And years ago, we created the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. We set it up to be in charge of the airwaves that belong to the American people, to make sure that those airwaves were being used prudently by radio stations. For example, if a radio station is bought by a bunch of foreign nationals or foreign entities, the FCC has got to approve it. For example, anytime a broadcast license, as is the case with Odyssey, is transferred, the FCC has to approve it. So Mr. Soros' purchase of WWL radio and the 219 other radio stations had to go before the FCC. And it did. And it went, the approval for Mr. Soros went through the FCC like green grass through a goose. And it was a party line vote. It was last September. All three Democrats, there are 5 people on the FCC, all 3 Democrats said, let it go. And they short-circuited the normal process. Now, I'm not an FCC expert, and I'm not a communications law expert, but I've read, this has been widely reported, and I've read about it in many reports. Normally, on a deal of this size, when 220 radio stations are being transferred, their licenses, using airwaves that belong to the American people, and there's a substantial percentage of foreign owners, it would take about a year to get through the FCC. FCC would do a complete investigation. Not this time, no. This time was special. What happened was what some members of the media have called the Soros shortcut. They just got together and rammed it through. Did I mention it was like green grass through a goose? 3-2. Now, the two Republicans on the commission, they're screaming the whole time, whoa, Nellie, whoa, whoa. Why aren't we taking this seriously? Why aren't we investigating this? Why aren't we doing our due diligence? They were outvoted, 3-2. You know, when even in a democracy, when you've got the votes, you can make a porcupine like hot peppers if you've got the votes. That doesn't make it right. A number of people petitioned the FCC and said, please don't do this. One of the groups that petitioned the FCC was a group called Media Research Center. The FCC, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, dismissed them. But this is what the Media Research Center said. Quote, their words, not mine. There is no question that George Soros and his affiliated businesses are looking to control these radio stations to advance their particular brand of activism, close quote. And the MRC urged the FCC not to create, quote, a special Soros shortcut, quote, that would circumvent their rules and allow the deal to move forward. It did it anyway.
Get this. George Soros now owns over 200 radio stations across America. Yeah, you heard that right. The puppet master of the radical left, the guy who bankrolls woke prosecutors, open borders, and every anti-American policy under the sun, now controls the microphone in over 40 media markets, including right in the heart of the South. One of the crown jewels in this grab? WWL Radio in Louisiana, a station with a legacy stretching back over 100 years, back when America was tougher, prouder, and actually respected its roots. Now, it's part of the Soros empire. And how did this happen? Well, folks, here's how the game is played in the globalist world. When a company like Odyssey, which owns these stations, starts to crumble under nearly $2 billion in debt, vultures circle. And no one circles quite like George Soros. He swoops in, buys up $415 million of that debt for dirt cheap, and before you know it, he's the biggest shareholder, calling the shots, controlling the broadcast. This wasn't a business decision. This was a coordinated power play. And you know who gave it the green light? The FCC, the very agency that's supposed to protect American airwaves. They rubber-stamped this takeover without a single public hearing. Not one. Just a straight-up party line vote. Democrats in favor, Republicans sounding the alarm. And the rest of us? Left out of the conversation. Let me be absolutely clear. This is not about one radio station. This is about the future of free speech in America. George Soros doesn't buy media to make money. He buys media to influence minds, to shape elections, to twist the truth until America forgets who she really is. And we've seen it time and time again. In the cities where his radical prosecutors let criminals walk free, where police are demonized, where borders are erased, and where the woke mob runs wild. Now he wants to do the same thing through your car radio, your morning news, your favorite sports broadcast. He wants to whisper poison into the ears of Americans every single day. But we're not going to sit quietly, are we? This is the radical left's next big step. If they can't win the argument, they'll just buy the microphone. If they can't convince you with facts, they'll just drown them out with propaganda. And Soros has the money, the influence, and now the infrastructure. It's not a conspiracy. It's a strategy. And this strategy is aimed right at the heart of Middle America. They want to reshape the South. They want to silence conservative voices. They want to flood your hometowns with their twisted values, all under the guise of public service broadcasting. It's not public service, it's public subversion. So what do, patriots? We fight back, not with violence, not with hate, but with truth, unity, and action. Start by asking the hard questions. Who's behind the mic on your local station? Who funds your favorite news anchors? Why is the FCC allowing massive media consolidation by foreign-backed billionaires? Then take action. Support local, independent, patriotic media. Call your representatives and demand they investigate these backroom deals. Share this video so more Americans understand what's happening behind the scenes. And most of all, stay alert. Because the war for America's soul isn't just being fought in Washington. It's being fought in our neighborhoods, our schools, our churches, and now our radios. Soros and his ilk want to build an America that doesn't remember what it means to be American. But not on our watch. This is Right View Nation, and we are the firewall. We are the voice of common sense, of hard work, of God, family, and country. We will not be bought. We will not be silenced, and we sure as hell will not be controlled. So if you're as fired up as I am, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this message with every red-blooded patriot you know. Drop a comment below and tell me how you're standing up for the truth in your community. Because the only way they win is if we stay quiet. And I don't know about you, but I don't do quiet. Until next time, this is Right View Nation, signing off, standing strong, standing free, and standing proud. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.